Our next story takes us to Idaho, where Doomsday Cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell is gearing up for trial. This week, each party submitted their proposed jury instructions, giving us a potential glimpse into each of their cases. Jury selection for Vallow starts in just about 2 weeks. She faces murder, grand theft, and conspiracy charges in the deaths of her 2 children, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. She is also charged with the death of Tammy Daybell, the ex-wife of her husband, Chad Daybell. He will be tried separately on similar charges. According to the state's proposed instructions, they allege that Lori, Chad, and Lori's late brother, Alex Cox, conspired to murder Lori's children along with Tammy. The state believes the murders were justified by the family through their religious beliefs, as well as the collection of Social Security money. The defense's proposed instructions focus heavily on the fact that feelings and opinions don't equal guilt, and the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. We spoke with a jury consultant who explained key themes the attorneys should focus on when picking a jury. Here's what she had to say.
What they have to explore is her mental health issues. This has been a very big thing that's been on the table for a long time. You know, was she mentally ill? And that's the thing, is that everybody's wondering. And also, was that mental illness one of such magnitude that would have caused her to create such a heinous offense against her children? That's what the defense is stating. They're stating that she was mentally ill, that, you know, Viola has taken her over, that has talked her into killing her children. And so then that kind of brings you into those religious beliefs, right? So this is kind of that strange offspring, that cult offspring of the Mormon religion, which is not your traditional Mormon belief. So I think that the religious beliefs are going to be a big one, especially where this is located, right? So the other thing too is this premeditation. That's also another big one on here, those mitigating factors. Was this something that was premeditated?
So Bernard, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as well. The proposed question seemed a little light. There were like 3 or 4 main topics, but what does that tell you about what the focus is on this case?
Exactly. The proposed jury instructions, as I saw it, it's not really going to the heart of the matter. When you're focusing on selecting the jury, you want to make sure that the jury that you select are jurors that can be fair and impartial, and meaning that the jurors don't have already a predetermined decision as to the guilt of Ms. Vallow. So in determining that, you have to ask questions. What is their mind frame? What do they think about certain issues? And that is something that we're not seeing now. I think the defense may just have to go with, look, the prosecution's not proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt, that there are holes in this case, but I don't know if they're really going to go much into the mental state of Lori Vallow in order to try to get an acquittal in this case.
I mean, Nima, I would have thought that I would have seen questions like, what do you think about cults, the end of days, children being killed, parents accused of killing children? Shouldn't we expect those types of questions in the jury selection process?
I agree, Brian, and I also agree with Bernardo. I mean, I'm excited for this case. A very sad case, but I thought we'd be hearing about Armageddon, the zombie apocalypse. We're all supposed to be dead by now, so this is a very unique case. You got to tailor your jury instructions to the facts of this case, especially when, at least it may be a capital case with respect to Chad Daybell. Of course, the prosecution botched their discovery obligations, so the death penalty's off the table with respect to Lori.
Yeah, maybe a juror believes in the end of days and they're just doing this jury selection till then, or maybe they think this is completely crazy. You'll never know, but we'll see. Well, while the death penalty won't be an option for Lori Vallow, Idaho lawmakers are making it easier for convicted criminals to die by firing squad. A bill was approved on Monday with a veto-proof majority, and it's now in the hands of State Governor Brad Little. If the bill is signed, death by firing squad will only be used as a backup plan in 2 scenarios. 1, if Idaho cannot get access to drugs used in lethal injections, and 2, if lethal injection is deemed unconstitutional by a court. A fiscal note included in the bill says it will cost nearly $800,000 to meet the appropriate requirements for firing squad executions. The most recent state to allow firing squad executions was South Carolina, which passed a bill last March. And in other news, a Georgia man recently won the right to move forward with a lawsuit against the state because he wants to be put to death by firing squad. Michael Wade Nance has been on death row since 2002. He was convicted of murdering a man while fleeing a bank robbery. Nance sued the Georgia Department of Corrections in 2020, saying lethal injections would amount to torture, which would violate his constitutional rights. Nance claims his regular use of a medicine for back pain would make his brain less responsive to a sedative given during lethal injection. A Georgia judge is now overseeing the matter. Attorneys for the retired eye doctor suing celebrity Gwyneth Paltrow are laying out the changes their client experienced after a ski slope collision with the actress left him with a brain injury. It happened 7 years ago at Deer Valley Resort in Park City, Utah. Paltrow and Terry Sanderson, who's now in his 70s, were traveling down a slope at the same time. One of them crashed into the other, and each says the other one is at fault. While Paltrow had some minor injuries from the collision, Sanderson had multiple broken ribs and that brain injury we mentioned. Well, Sanderson then filed a lawsuit in 2019 and Paltrow countersued. He's seeking at least $300,000 in damages on a negligence claim. In her countersuit, Paltrow is requesting just $1 in damages and for Sanderson to cover her legal fees. One of Sanderson's daughters testified Thursday. The attorney asked her how her father changed after the 2016 accident.
Before he could have lots going on, and now it's very A to B. A to B, don't throw in a C or a D, right? Because then we're gone completely. So how do we simplify, and just this task, just A to B. Maybe take it as kind of a gift to be in the present with what you're doing right now. Let's just focus on this one step. And I think that's easy for me to try to say, how do we move forward? But I understand that there's a lot of grief and loss for the way that his life functioned before, that it doesn't function now.
All right, I'm joined by two special guests today, former prosecutor and trial attorney Bernardo Villalona and former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. So Nima, let's start with you. How do we know these personality changes, I think this is what the defense is, or what Paltrow's attorneys are getting at, were really caused by the ski collision? How does a plaintiff prove that?
Brian, we don't know. And brain injuries, they're invisible injuries. So we know Paltrow's attorney, they're attacking this case on two bases. Liability, of course, who was the right of way and who was lower down the slope, but also damages. We know that brain injuries, those are invisible injuries. So that's where the neuropsych testing, that's where the medical doctors come in. That's where the family members, loved ones come in, talk about memory issues, cognitive difficulties, but it's not like an orthopedic injury. There's not going to be an x-ray. There's not going to be an MRI, usually a positive MRI, whether it's a brain or a CT. So it's going to really be up to those medical and lay witnesses to prove the brain injury in this case.
Yeah, and Bernardo, it's been 7 years since this collision happened. Do you think the jury has taken that into account in any way?
I think at some point the jury does have that question in the back of their minds, in the sense of why are we just not hearing about this case in 2023? But you should remember that the judge will probably give an instruction as to the timing of it. You have to also think that we went through the COVID-19 pandemic, and that pretty much shut down the justice system. It shut down the courthouses, so cases weren't being tried and cases weren't moving at all. So that's also a reasoning for the delay in this case. But we still have the few years before the pandemic that nothing was going on, but they're hearing about it now.
Yeah, well, we'll see how the jury handles that. Of course, we'll keep eyes on the Paltrow case with Anderson. And an important update for you now on a case we've actually been following. Jennifer and James Crumbley, parents of the Michigan school shooter, can go to trial on involuntary manslaughter charges. The Crumbleys are both facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter after their son opened fire inside a high school, killing 4 students. Prosecutors say the parents should have known that their son was experiencing mental health problems and should not have bought him a gun. They point out that the Crumbleys were alerted by school staff that their son was struggling and his parents chose to send him back to class. He committed the shooting later that day. The defense says charging the parents is an overreach, but the appeals court affirmed the lower court's decision that the parents could be bound over for trial. We also have an update on a case of a Microsoft executive gunned down in a targeted attack in Florida. The suspect, Mario Saldana Fernandez, appeared before a judge for the first time. Police believe Fernandez was involved in a scheme to kill his new wife's ex-husband. The alleged triggerman, Henry Tenen, agreed to plead guilty and testify against any accomplices. Fernandez appeared in court to hear the charges against him, which include first-degree murder. Police say Jared Briggan had just dropped off his twins at their mother's home and was headed back to his own place with his 2-year-old in the car. When he came across a tire in the road, he got out to move it. Police say then Tenden shot him. An exact motive has not yet been released. Still ahead on Law